two-parter. I wanted to have him come in and talk to the female physician entrepreneurs about app development. This is what he does. I know every once in a while we get questions about apps, so I thought that it would be a good idea to have Luke come in. Thank you to Dr. Rivka Cohen also for making that introduction to Luke. Luke, why don't you go ahead, tell us about yourself, how you got into app development, the company you presently have, and I'd love to hear about it.
Sure. So Sharon, first of all, the name of the company is Designik Agency. That's what me and my loving wife, we kind of operate. And we've got about like 25 people working for us over here. Now, about my background, I kind of actually started out as a designer. So I started out like designing websites, brands, logos. I just guess like that's usually the starting point for every business, every idea. Usually started like with a logo, some colors, some fonts, and then I really got into how things were made, how things were developed. I got into backend systems, the logics, the fundamentals on a web application. And it's always like the starting point for any mobile app. It's always like a web app. Think of like something like Facebook or LinkedIn. So it's usually a web app that's like on your computer. And then there's an extension, which is like a mobile app. So it's when I started working on web applications, I felt like, and I think that's when mobile phones, like people were really, getting used to smartphones back in 2010. So people, started using smartphones, mobile applications started becoming really common. And that's when I got into mobile applications. First started in Android, but now it's like iPhone, Android, Apple Watches, and we call it like hybrid application development. So there's native, there's hybrid. And so me and my agency, we kind of do it all. We work on mobile applications, not just the application part of it, but the design part of it, the strategy part of it, understanding the users, the pain points, and how to basically have an application that's more like a solution. So at the end of the day, the user that's using it, it's a simple solution, seamless, for them to, solve any sort of problem that's being solved.
Excellent. All right, take it away. Like if someone had an idea for an app, where would you, or do you want to do a presentation? However you want to take this on, but that's like the question. I want an app. That's what they say, and they're like, they don't know where to go from here.
Oh, perfect. That's the question that I hear the most. In my 15 years of career, that's like how it all starts. So when somebody comes to me and tells me that, look, I want to get an app and I have an idea, the first thing is always to understand the idea. And more importantly, it's more about who's the app for, who's the end user, who's the target audience. On that note, I've actually designed a presentation for everybody. So I would be happy to play that on my screen if you may.
Sure.
Let's share my screen. Let me know if you guys can see the screen.
Yep, beautiful slides.
Perfect. So I kind of wanted to focus on how application development kind of goes in line with what physicians do, because I feel like a lot of that connects together. Since my wife's a doctor too, I feel like a lot of it is basically problem solving. A lot of it is basically understanding what is needed, when it's needed. So I'm going to start with the physician advantage. What I feel that physicians possess that can actually really be helpful in making an application. So from like the process for an application kind of starts the same way as diagnosing a patient, understanding the market gap. So let's say if we're building a solution to solve telemarketing or, let's say telehealth, right? People are looking to find a doctor and we want to get an application. First thing I would want to, ask the client would be, how would you know that who's looking for help? What are their pain points? What gets them to act? What gets them to, download the app? And how would the app solve their problem? That's where the problem solving comes in. Now, every app is basically designed to solve one specific problem. And then it kind of goes down to minor details, like options, multiple, features and functionalities. Now, usually starts off with a phase, which I call a discovery phase. Now, think of it as like, talking to a patient, the diagnosis. So, understanding the target audience and what they're looking for. Who needs a solution, how that solution is going to be going to that person, then mapping, identifying the pain points. We document, what are their pain points? Are they trying to search for a doctor online? If somebody's looking for a provider online, What are they going to go? Like, are they going to go on Google, search for an app? Did they get a link? They download an app? Or do they want to not download something and just use it on their, laptop or PC? Those are the pain points. Then the validation comes in. That's where we understand the core features. Now, there's a massive confusion with audiences regarding core features and what they want to have in their apps. A lot of the times you kind of get to minor details on, okay, I want to have this feature, I want to have that feature, but we sort of miss out on the major features. And that's what we call scope creep. Scope creep is basically getting too much into the details and forgetting about all the major features and functionalities. And after validation comes the strategy, where we kind of set like goals, timelines, how are we going to measure goals, how are we going to have KPIs, like what is something that's going to make the app success? Is it going to be 100 downloads, 1,000 downloads? And what are going to be the monetization strategies? How would you make the app work? Now that comes the point where I say that's more about validating your idea, which is basically market research. And once you know who the app's going to be for, an important part of the job is to understand, how does the market look like for that app? Are there any competitors? What are the consumers? What other application are those people using right now? And are those solutions solving the same problem as you are? Or are they solving something else? And if yes, if let's say most of the applications actually have features that others do as well. I mean, if I break it down, let's talk social media. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they all kind of have like similar features, but they're all positioned differently. That's what we call brand positioning. Like, how is the brand going to be positioned differently? I mean, Facebook allows you to post a photo. Instagram does that too. LinkedIn does that as well. So they all have like the same features. The way they're positioned, it's a little different. When you look at Facebook, it's more like a community where you can talk to people, engage. Instagram is more like a photo sharing app. You share details about your life, your photos. LinkedIn is where you can share a photo, but it has to be more professional, something related to your workplace or what you do. So if the positioning is different, the features are the same. That's basically all part of the market research, the market viability. Then you also start talking to users. So anybody who you feel would be an ideal user for your application, you start doing the collection, you start getting their feedback on what is it going to be like if I make a next app, and if there was like a solution available to your problem, would that make your life easier? Would you pay X amount for that application? When you understand that, you know exactly what needs to be built. Going over to pillar 2, that's the best part, the anatomy of the app. How's the app going to look? What are the key steps? So it all starts with front end, which is basically the visual part of the app, the colors, the photos, the font, every single thing that you see out there. So when a user interacts with the app, they're interacting with the front end. The back end of the application, that's more like the brains of the app. So think about logic, think about processing. What problem is it solving? How fast is it solving that problem? What is going to be the logic? If it has a search engine, if it is going to have a search functionality, or if it's going to be something that's going to allow people to schedule or pay. That's called backend. And there's another complex part which we call API, server communications. Make it simple. API is basically two different softwares talking to each other. A good example would be, let's say you make an app, but then you want to connect Google Meet or Zoom to your application. Since Google Meet or Zoom are softwares, all of those softwares have their own individual API. We call that an API key, and that is more like a handshake between two different apps. So your app sort of doing a handshake with Zoom. What it does is it allows you to add features from Zoom on your application through an API key. Then comes the database, which is sort of like your app's memory, where all of the important information is going to be stored. Think about user profiles, user information. If your app allows user to create an account or sign in, so every single activity that they're going to do on the app, it gets stored in the database. Now, a couple of things to consider when you go for a database. It needs to be secure because you're handling people's data. So you need to be careful and mindful about that. And it also needs to be fast, something that, if I log into the app, I can see all of my details right there on my screen. I don't have to wait a couple of minutes for it to load. That's basically data persistence. Now, the crucial part of designing an app starts with wireframing, which is kind of same as a floor plan for a clinic. It's like, what's going to be the structure? the groundwork for the app. So wireframing is more like technical drawing for the app, understanding what features you want to have without the use of colors, without the use of imagery. So if you can see on my screen, it shows app user flow wireframe. That's technically how wireframe looks. It doesn't have colors, but it is basically done to show somebody or to kind of get an idea on how the app's going to look, where all the important information is going to be. So basically, you're architecting the information for the app, where you want to display a photo, where there's going to be a text box, where there's going to be a button. That's the wireframing. Now, step 2 is the good part. The colors, the design, which we call the UI and the UX. So UI is short for user interface, and UX is short for user experience. Both of them actually serve a different purpose. A user experience is how simple the application is to maneuver. Let's say for somebody who's 20 years old versus somebody who's 70 years old. If they are going to be using your application, how easy it is for them to navigate if they're not tech savvy, if they're not used to, too many features of technology. So the comfort, the easiness, all of that's a part of the user experience. The UI is the visuals. How pretty is the app? Now, both of them kind of define how many people are going to be using the app, how much people are going to love the experience. So both of them are really important. UI is where we talk about colors, fonts, graphics, photos, animations, all the things that make it look pretty. But always say a good application is a good mix of a really good looking UI and a good performing user experience. So knowing where to put the buttons. So let's say if your application has a sign up button or it has a sign in button, you always want to be mindful on where do you want to place it versus like easily visible. And we call those CTAs, call to action. A call to action is basically the kind of action you want your end user or your client to take when they're on your app or website. So placing those buttons strategically, understanding that, okay, if the user comes in, because you don't know if that user is tech savvy or not, is that button visible? Is that button repeated on multiple steps of the website or the app? If yes, that's a great user experience. If no, that's a bad user experience. Moving on to pillar 2, step 3, that is the development. That's the most crucial part of the application. Now that's basically building every single functionality, every single feature, piece by piece, not all together. So the surgical building phase, as I call it, that's the phase where all the development happens. Now that is where you're connecting the front end, which is the visual, the look and feel, with the back end on how things work. So the wireframes are brought to life with integrations. Just like I said in the previous step, APIs, that's where they come in. You start connecting APIs, you start bridging the gap, and you start adding features. Now the app can have any sort of feature. Let's say it can be a payment integration. So for example, you want people to pay with PayPal or Stripe on your app. You want to have people have the ability to pay via credit cards. So what you would do is you would go into your PayPal account, you would download or copy your PayPal API key, which is a secret key that's for every individual that's different. So that way no one can use your details to collect payments on their end. You copy it, you add it to your application, you connect it together, and what that does is it enables PayPal's credit card system on your app. So next time when people are paying, they pay via PayPal, and all that money comes to your account. That's what an API does. You do want to make sure there's security and compliance on the application. So every single piece of code that gets written for the app is secure, it's compliant, especially if it's medical. If it's a medical application, then you do want to understand HIPAA compliance. And then the next thing would be unified agency advantage. So that's where the execution, the dedication, integration, that is either handled by an agency or a team of professionals, because these are the phases you want to get done before you hand it over to an agency or professional, so that your idea can actually be the same way you want it executed. A lot of the times people think of ideas that, okay, I want to have like this type of app, but they don't have any, means to visualize it. Now, since we have a lot of AI systems available, so there's, and I'm going to be getting to that later, but there are like a lot of ways for you to visualize how your app's going to look without being a developer, without being a designer or a coder. So I'm going to give you those options at the end of the conversation. Now, step 4 is testing and launch. That's an important step once everything's ready. First step or first phase that we have is called a QA, where you do the quality assurance of the application. Try to use it as the user would. or you give it over to people to beta test it, to understand if they're having any sort of problems, if there's any sort of glitch on the application, if the application is causing any problems. Once you collect data on that, we call that a V2 or a version 2.0. That's where the changes are made, the application is polished, finalized, and that is when it's ready for the market. We have a couple of things, we kind of check for multi-device validation, making sure that the application is working across all devices. Sometimes it might look really good on an iPhone, but it might not look really good on an iPad. Now, the same apps that are built for iPhones usually work on iPads, but you want to make sure that the screen size, the screen ratio, that's perfect. And when every single thing is good to go, the final step is the store launch, which is basically if it's an Android app, then you go to Google Play Store. To start the launch process, you submit it over to Google. Google validates it, approves it, your app is live. If you go with Apple, Apple does have a lot more policies than Google, so you guys might have noticed it's easy to put an application on Play Store. You might actually see a lot of mobile apps on Play Store, but you don't see the same amount of apps on App Store. The reason being, Apple is really strict with their policies. So if the apps meets their criteria, then it's good to go on the App Store. Now, this is what I was talking about in the start. This is what we call the feature creep. Now, this is basically getting ahead too fast with the mobile app. That means if you have a lot of ideas in your head, I always say it's best to focus on the initial ones, the ones that would actually simplify the solution, instead of getting into too much details. So that's like trying to cure all the problems in version 1. I say leave that for the future updates, because in any good application, there are multiple updates that happen. If you have some app on your phone, you're probably going to see a new update come in every couple of weeks or every month. That's usually if things are actually being better, more features being put in for the app, or it might even be a bug fix or a security fix. If there's a feature creep, then I usually recommend delaying the launch, because that also is ineffective. So a lot of time, complex apps, they do confuse early users, which means if you're going to put a lot of features and if somebody just joined the app for the first time, the biggest problem they would have would be to navigate, to understand how and what works the way it does. So it's better to kind of make simpler apps initially, and then as you get user feedback, you keep on making those additions and changes. The other thing is basically what I call an MVP strategy. An MVP is your most viable product. So you only build the core features in an MVP. So let's say if you're building an app and you want to test it out, or let's say you're getting an investor on board. You have a really good idea and you want to build a really big app, but you want to get an investor on board. Most investors usually ask for an MVP to just see how the idea is, how that's going to look, how that's going to work. And for that, you basically build important features, the core part of the application, and then guide for next updates. That's usually for early adopters to gather feedback, to understand how people like it. And that's the cycle for an MVP. Moving on, this is what I was mentioning when I said you don't need an agency, you don't need a developer, you develop your idea. So now there are a lot of ways to build an app or design an app without coding, without any design knowledge. There are tools like Bubble, there are tools like Lovable, there are tools like Google's AI Studio. I'll get you the links for all of them, but those are the tools where you can just, write your idea in like plain simple English, and that tool is actually going to build the app, not the entire app. We'll get to that later, but it's going to give you the idea on a visual format so you can like test it out. You can show it over to people. And once you have enough data and you feel comfortable, that's when you can take that idea over to an agency. Now, what it does is, traditionally, if you take your idea to an agency from scratch, it is going to cost you more because that involves a lot of strategy, a lot of branding, a lot of ideas. But if you've already built an MVP using these no-code platforms, then you're saving a lot of the cost. So you're only having the agency work on the technical part of it, while you've really solved like the strategy part of it. And the most important part, knowing when to call a specialist. So if we're going to call a specialist like me to help you with the app, it's good to kind of, if you're a solo builder or a solo entrepreneur, you do want to ensure that you're using no-code tools just so you know what you're looking for, the idea, how it's going to be executed. And that way you can kind of hand it over to an agency like mine. And that explains a lot of the process, kind of saves you a lot of costs on design, because a lot of those things would be built by the no-code tool. So you can move towards growth and complexity without, putting a strain on the budget. And with that, that comes to an end. So we can start building some great ideas. Any questions? Anybody? Yes, Sharon, your mic is mute, I guess.
Yes, I did, because I'm always like, I never just keep still. Sarah, I see you. I see Pooja. This is a great opportunity to ask. So ask your questions. Allison, Rivka, I think you know this probably inside. I think you have some special connections there. So I'm not so sure that you need to ask a question, but you're more than welcome to.
Hi,
Sarah,
I'll ask or I can start.
yeah, Pooja, great.
For sure.
So I actually was in, like, I'm a cardiologist, so I got very excited about AI and all these things. And I did build a prototype on Base 44, like a MVP designed as a AI generated cardiology wellness platform. And after building it, I haven't figured out how to integrate it with, I know there are APIs with like EMRs and then people's device, like Apple Watch and wearables, and then how to like fine tune and make it better. Like I'm kind of feeling I haven't figured out how to progress the idea further after building the basic prototype.
That's a great question, Pooja. I actually get that asked a lot. So let's say when an app relies a lot on AI, for example, let's say your app uses Gemini or GPT, right? All of them actually have like different core concepts that they work with. So an AI built app usually relies on an API from that provider, and we call that tokens. So for example, if your app is going to go live on the internet for people, so every time that they use the AI, it is going to cost you tokens. Now that can either be with OpenAI's API. It can be Gemini. They all issue enterprise grade APIs. And what happens is when you integrate that within your app, you can actually use their brain, their AI, but it will cost you on every single click or every single time they search for it. It costs about a cent, 2 cents, but there's always like a cost to it.
I guess follow up to that is there something where I can integrate like with the thing I built, which I use various cardiometabolic parameters for people, like how to integrate EMRs and wearables into the app, like so that it can pull people's information and they don't have to manually feed it. So the data that's in there gives like better results, like, hey, your activity level is up, down, or we noticed labs as this. Like, is there a way to do that?
Absolutely. Different ways of doing that. One way of doing that would definitely be embedding. So, for example, let's say for the EMR, if you have access to that EMR, you can actually embed it within the application. That's not the most preferred way. The most preferred way would be an API key, just like I talked about with PayPal and with our other applications. EMRs actually have API keys as well. So when you take that API key, what it does is it's basically two applications speaking to each other. Let's say the EMR is speaking to your application. And what it does is it sends data back and forth in real time. So as you said, like you need to collect data for your application to work, you would want to connect their API key to your application. So it would bridge the gap between the data and your application. One tool that I can recommend you that can actually solve a lot of that problem would be Claude. So if you go on to Claude and if you upload your application or what you've built already, and you ask it for integrations, it can actually provide you integrations in a much more easier way than Lovable or a GPT would.
Okay, I'll try that. Yeah, I got so excited when I first started, and I feel now it's like plateauing, and I'm like, and just clinical work gets busy, and I'm like, I feel I'm not working enough on the idea.
Now, it's going to actually get you access to some AI bots as well. What it can do for you is when you're busy doing the clinical work, those bots can be working for you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool feature of Cloud.
Awesome. Thank you.
Perfect.
Lucas, evident you know your stuff. Thank you for coming to speak to us.
Absolutely.
Sarah, any questions? What are you thinking about? You showed up. Do you have an idea for an app? Do you want us to sign like a non-compete? Just give a general, if you're aware. No, seriously.
No, I've had a couple of ideas over the years, and I just haven't been able to sort of coordinate an approach plan, to exploring it. So I was really excited about the talk tonight, just to see if I can make a little bit of progress. I'm still trying to even consider the feasibility of things and, figure out like what scale to start things at. So actually a lot of the points you made early on, Luke, were really helpful for me to start clarifying, like realizing that, yes, these are in fact things I should know, before I get started. I think one of the things for me is I actually really love the ideas and the design and, the conceptualization, but I really don't care to create it, like to do the, I don't know, you mentioned bubble or lovable, like I don't actually need to do that. So are there ways that you can just sort of hire that side of it done or work in collaboration with someone that can kind of take on that side of the role? And yeah.
100%. So I think that's where agencies like mine come in. So over the years, what I've been doing for people, it's either one phase or like a complete solution. For example, if a physician, I'll say physician because that would relate. If a physician comes to me with an idea and they tell me that, Luke, this is the idea, we can actually do two things. One would be basically market research. Ask the physician that if you want to scale this app, scale this idea, then it's ideal to actually do market research. That would actually give us the idea on where to place the app in terms of brand position. It's just like I said with Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn example, brand positioning is really important. It can be the same features that another platform, another app can have, but the way you present your app, that's what makes it different. Like LinkedIn's got the ability to post, so does Facebook, so does Instagram. All of them actually have like different target audiences. LinkedIn's got professionals, Facebook and Instagram, they've got everybody, from business pages to personal profiles. So when you tell me about an idea, what I would start would be the discovery phase, understanding who your target audience is, making a deep audit of that. Now, based on that, we would actually have like the initial directions on, okay, let's start building an MVP. So in your case, what I would do is basically design an MVP. That's more like a low-cost solution to get the idea on a visual format. And I would actually love to, show you how I usually do MVPs.
How much does this cost to get, like, I build this MVP, which is not very professional on base 44, but like to make it more integrated or embedded with EMRs and wearables, but I don't know AI enough how to use these tools proficiently quite yet. I've been thinking, do I need to take a AI course where I learn these, or same thing. Do I hire somebody if it's not too expensive, whose strengths or wheelhouse is actually like making these things better? Would that speed up the process? How much in the ballpark does it because you don't want to invest too much into something, like you build something nice and pretty and nobody wants to buy, and you're like, okay, well, that was a fun project. Like you wanted to have an uptake. Yeah.
Right. Great question, Pooja. So in terms of costing and pricing, if you feel like your idea is something that you want to test it out, so never go for a full-scale app, because a full-scale app can cost you starting from 10K all the way to like 20, 30, 50K, depending on what it's being built on, because most of the cost is related to the platform. How fast it is, what problem does it solve, what sort of APIs does it connect to, because if it's connecting to bigger APIs, just like you said, like Gemini or OpenAPI, then that is going to cost a lot. What I would recommend is, in that case, go for an MVP. An MVP is something that you can get built for under a 5K budget. And what it does is it does all of those things your app would without all of those details. So an MVP would basically be a structure of the app that works, gets the job done, and is really good to kind of give you an idea and to test it out with the market, because what you want to do is basically beta test it. Show it over to different people, get their feedback on how they like it. Are they willing to pay money for it? Would they subscribe to the application if you have like subscriptions? If you're selling a service with the application, would they be paying for that? Once you get that data, that's when you understand that, okay, is it feasible for me to like invest another 10K on developing it? And that's one more problem with AI development, which is like a good thing and a bad thing. With the power of AI, what you can do to like bring down your cost is you can develop a core MVP that does the job, but it would not be a fully functional app, because one thing a lot of people struggle with AI is actually having a database. An AI application works really good natively, which means on your laptop, it's going to do really good. But when you publish the application on a phone, App Store, or Android, you basically need a database, which is basically a system or memory where all of that data is stored. AI applications or platforms usually do not have databases, so they don't have any way of like storing all that information. It resets every single time you're using it. I can show you guys a live example. I've actually got a Google AI Studio right over here, and I would love to kind of show you guys, do like a live demo. So does anybody have an idea that we can kind of try?
I do. I had built it. So my idea was AI-based cardiology wellness. So basically, people feed in their vitals, height, weight, BMI, lab markers, and then there's a thing called ASCVD risk score. So using the AI, they get a result. You're low risk for heart disease, intermediate risk for heart disease, or high risk for heart disease. Like they get prompts, and then if it integrates with their wearables, they get live data. Hey, we're noticing that your sleep quality is going down or your activity level. So it gives live insights. If those who are high risk, my idea initially was they get like it flags and then they can see a cardiologist, which is me directly. But then I got a lot of feedback that, hey, if you're seeing them, it could be conflict of interest, which I'm not 100% sure it is or it's not, because if the app is like flagging high risk people, especially if I do at an enterprise level, I wanted to market to insurance companies or employers. And my idea was that, hey, if we detect heart attack early or detect people with like who are probably going to have heart issues later early, it saves insurance companies money, self-employers like employees who do self-insurance money. But
That's a
and
really
I
good
built
idea.
base. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I was saying that's a really good idea. What I would say from a cost point of view, one of the biggest drawback with that idea would basically be the wearable technology. Because let's say for each wearable, let's talk about Apple Watch. You would need to purchase APIs for every single wearable, plus the licensing as well. Because what you're basically doing is you're actually getting, you basically need a version of the application that's available in every single place. Let's say if you're tapping to Apple Health, then you basically need access to data from Apple Health. Now, I would recommend, there are a couple of ways that works. I've actually worked on a platform similar to that for a dentist. And what it basically does is it pulls up live data, but you really don't want it to pull up live data. Because if you're actually pulling up live data for every single second, then you would basically be filling up your database much faster. Think of databases like a pool. It can be really big, but if you're pulling data from 100 users every single second, then you're filling that database up with constant data every single second. So it can fill up fast.
So I guess my next thought was initially, or feedback I got was, instead of marketing to employers or insurance companies, which in my mind has scale, do like pilot to consumers or see if people sign up for like subscription based apps, and then I can still provide clinical oversight and market it as $300 a month or whatever, but you get a cardiology 30-minute consultation. So the app initially would take up because, hey, they're going to get to speak to a cardiologist, and getting in live for a 30-minute consultation in it of itself might be hard, like especially if they're risk profiling different data, and people can self-feed, like it doesn't stay there. Maybe they can put their epic, but I think people would love if it automatically integrates. I did find some companies who will, like, for $400 a month or something, pull all variables. There was few, I'd gone to a conference and they said, yeah, that's what we do, we integrate all variables. So I was thinking set up a call with them, or I'm not sure what's the next best way to proceed.
I mean, the next best way initially would be, yes, you can actually pull up all the data for the wearables. The next step for you would basically be, how would that data integrate with your current system to sort of make it easier? You can get that data. That's a solution. That's absolutely doable. But once that data comes in, what is actually happening? The first thing you would want to do is basically make a roadmap on that data. Let's say the API gets you that data. That data is in your system. What are you going to be doing with that data? Now, just like you said, that you want to connect, telehealth platforms to that for people to be able to schedule, a meeting with their cardiologist. Then which telehealth platform are you going to, basically you want to just collect all of those pieces on which platform are you going to be using for what purpose. And what that does is you don't have to natively develop those platforms inside of your app. You're just using already built tools and connecting them to your application. So your app is more like a master funnel, like a big place where all those tools are working together, tied in, without you reinventing the wheel, if that makes sense.
Yeah. My husband has his own practice, so he uses OpenEMR, and it's free, and he has it reasonably built out. So I was thinking use his OpenEMR because I don't know how many patients initially, but for a basic version, I think his software or EMR works fine.
Oh, perfect. So I would say just more like focus on the visual part of it, on how it's going to work, how the user experience is going to be like. And once you actually have that figured out, what I can do is help you out with the whole process of, okay, this is the body of the application. Now, these are the tools that we're going to need. So basically, you get all those tools like the variable data. You get the tools like, which telehealth platform we're going to be using. You connect all of them to the application and then give it a test run.
Who would help me connect, or is that something you can use AI or Base 44 to connect?
Well, if you're doing it as a solopreneur, then you can definitely use AI to give you these steps and idea on how to do that. If you're choosing an agency, then 100% I can help out mapping the whole process, making the core MVP, and then you can take it from over there. And if it's
How
an
much
idea
does it cost? Like, I guess I don't want to invest in something if I'm not 100% it'll return, especially if it's a big number. So that's why I'm trying to get ideas. How much does it typically cost to like integrate these different variable API and then my husband's EMR into the platform or thing I've built, and then test it and see if people will buy those subscriptions?
Well, when building an application with an agency or even yourself, there are two types of costs. One we call a variable cost, which is more like the cost of the tools, cost of how much it's going to cost you every single month as like the bill from all those providers. Let's say you're using the APIs from multiple providers. The bill depends on what the usage is. Obviously, can be $50, can be $500. That's the variable cost. Fixed costs are usually the cost that developers or agencies charge to develop it, because once the application is developed, it is your own property, so you get to host it, you get to use it, so you don't have to keep paying that cost again. So the only cost which would be coming to you every single time will be the variable cost for different tools, different providers. Let's say you're using Google. Let's say you have maps on your application and you're using Google Maps for that. So Google Maps is an enterprise API. It's barely like $10 a month, but then that's a cost as well.
Got it. Yeah, I think they said for all variable integration, it's $400 a month for up to 500 users. So if it really scales, then I'm sure there's tiers, like
Absolutely.
the cost goes higher.
But if you're planning to go, set the application on an enterprise level, then yes, it's ideal to kind of, come up with how much you want to charge the user. I would recommend just starting with an MVP and testing it out with beta users just to see what they're responding to it, how well they like the application, and if they're willing to pay you the price for that subscription. Because that subscription price should cover a couple of things: the cost for your tools, the cost of the server, because an application does need a server and storage for it to work, the cost of the server, and then comes your profit on how much you want to profit off of that.
Got it. How much does it cost to have it on the server? Like, what's the price typically average?
Well, if you're putting it on a server, the one that works really good, if it's a medical app, then you definitely need to be HIPAA compliant with that. That's when Microsoft's Azure works really good, because Azure is HIPAA compliant. And if it's not a medical app, then you can go for Amazon's AWS, which does not offer HIPAA compliance, but it's a lot cheaper. So it technically depends on what your application offers.
Okay, got it. And how much is the fixed cost if I use help to get it built?
Well, if you're looking to get an MVP built, an MVP build can cost you anywhere from like 3,000 to 5,000, depending on the app's complexities.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I'm once I have these pieces figured out, I might reach out like how to integrate EMR and then show you what I've built to see like what tweaking
100%.
it needs.
I would actually love to see a final product or at least even a work in progress just to see, what your ideation is. And we do work both ways. We either work with ideas from scratch where, you just have an idea and you want to like see how it looks. We do that too. Just like Sarah said, if I have like an idea and if I want to give it life, see how it's going to look, we do that too. Or if you already have something in the works and you want me to, or my agency or people to take it from over there, we do that too.
Pooja might move faster with help,
Yeah, that's what I think because like work, life gets busy, you get
Yeah.
distracted. So if like you've hired, I think there's more. I think it just moves forward faster if there's some help. So
Yeah. I also think when you put money into it, I know that you're concerned about cost. When you put money into it, right, like you're gonna push it along.
To it.
You have skin in it.
100%
yeah,
Sharon.
yeah. I just want like ROI.
Yeah.
Like I just did STRs this year and like one is renting good, one is not. And I'm like, oh my God, I've invested. So anytime I don't see ROI, I get very frustrated because
Yeah.
I'm like, and then cash becomes tight because there's only so many projects you can. But this one, I really feel like AI and cardiology, both I'm pretty passionate about. So how to marry the two and build something. Yeah.
Those short-term rentals are hard. I've done family units on the side and I've gone into foreclosure. So I'll be happy to announce. Do you want to invest in other things? Do you want to invest in yourself? That's how I would look at it. You're the expert here with the cardiology and you get to test what patients want or need.
Yeah, I'm pretty like committed to the idea. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to move it forward.
Get help.
Yeah.
And if you need any help with discovery, Pooja, feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to help out with discovery, understanding what can work for you, versus which directions not to take.
Got it. Yeah, great. Yeah, I'll reach out. Thank you.
Perfect.
Luke, this has been wonderful. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Sarah, now's your time to ask. I see you still. Anything
I would love
else?
to
Well, you know what, Luke, could you put your contact in the chat so maybe
Absolutely.
people can, did you do that already? No, I don't see it. So maybe put your contact in the chat. I'll also do a post tomorrow. We'll do the replay. I'm sorry, my cats are having a good time. They're not actually my cats, they're my daughter's cats, but they're having a good time chasing each other. There's always something going on. But yes, we'll do a replay on the newsletter. This will go on YouTube, the replay. And please, I'm waiting for you to put it in the chat. So that's great. And if you have any follow-up questions, anybody, please reach out to Luke.
I might just ask real quick.
But please, Sarah, go. Yeah.
Is it possible to just set up, like hire like a one-time consultation to get a sense of like share some of the idea and explore what might be possible? I'm having a little bit of a difficulty because it's a broader idea, thinking what would be the MVP version of it, So it would be helpful just to be able to conceptualize with someone.
Absolutely, Sarah. We do those one-time consultations as well. Because a lot of time I feel like some ideas are really broad. So before you get into the full development cycle, you want to actually get an idea, get like a professional to pull some details up, to kind of like visualize a front end for you. So you can sort of like see how that's going to look, how that's going to work. And then kind of focus more on if you want to like create like a scalable version. So yes, we do offer one-time consultations to clients to, and that's where we can do a detailed deep dive discovery phase. Because I would absolutely want to learn and understand what your idea is, who that's for, and then provide you my input on how that's going to develop, how that's going to work. If you're going to develop it, what timelines to look for, what are the variable costs to go for, what are going to be the fixed costs. So you get like a really great idea about it.
That sounds great. Thank you.
For sure. And I usually have my calendar open for discussions and meetings. So I'd be happy to provide the link over.
Perfect.
Let's see. I'll put it in the chat. There we go.
Luke, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for all of your help.
A pleasure.
Yeah, really, very good. Right, Pooja, a lot of information.
Yeah, yeah, I did. Thank you so much.
Special shout out to Rivka for, offering to help. I appreciate you setting this up, making the connection. Thank you. And look, we have somebody coming in now. I don't know. Yes, yeah. All right, guys. So I know there's somebody just entering now. We are going to end this. This started at Eastern Standard Time at 7:30, but there will be a replay. It'll come out in the newsletter on Sunday. Luke, really, thanks so much for doing this for us. I appreciate it. And I'll make sure I put the replay in the group as well. All right, so we'll be able to newsletter as well as the group.
Perfect. So
Great
guys, it was a
presentation.
feel free to reach out if you need any help with your apps or ideas, or if you need somebody to talk to about, just the ideas.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. Okay.
Bye.
Bye, Sharon.
See you, Rivka. Bye-bye.
Bye.